an interesting problem now. Like the barrier of entry to building your own sound system is it's quite expensive, which is kind of like a good thing to talk about as the first bullet point of when people are asking about starting their own sound system journey. So a lot of the stuff, some of the stuff in here that I own in there is over a decade old. I mean, some of the equipment I still own is from the late 2000s, perhaps. So okay, again, one of the things that I've not just jumped in and bought all of this stuff. It takes a long time and patience of like building up kind of a level of equipment that you want to use. And again, just because I've got all this really crazy expensive stuff, it doesn't mean you have to use it. There's one thing the UK is blessed with is a very, very strong DIY sound system scene. There's probably almost definitely actually there's more DIY sound systems out there than there are places to play them, which it breeds the free parties, things like free parties. Like some of the extent that people do free parties are crazy. I could never do it, so fair play to people that do, just so they can play the music that they want to play in the way that they want to play it, in the style that they want to play it. And the side effect of that means that there's loads of second-hand equipment for sale in the UK. So even if someone wanted to build something from scratch, I would never even consider building something stupid as this, because it just costs astronomical amounts of money, and it's not depressingly worth any return on the investment. That would be like one of my first pieces of advice is patience. It takes a long time to build up, especially if you're working by yourself, which effectively I am financially. All of these purchases are made by myself and myself alone. That's mainly because I wanted to have singular creative control over the brand and the idea of where I wanted to push it. Also, if anyone was ever interested, I should have told this before, the reason it's called Sinai, it's quite funny really. So there's a mountain, it's in the Bible, where Moses goes up the mountain, and that's where he receives the 10 Commandments from God. Now, whether you believe in it or not, whether it actually happened or not, is kind of somewhat irrelevant. But the ideology behind it, as in the 10 Commandments, are kind of like a nice set of ideas for life, which can basically be summarized as just be nice to each other and don't be a dick. That's kind of how I see it. Like, don't steal, don't cheat, honor your father and mother. That's kind of like the idea behind it. That's kind of like the attitude that I try and promote is, I'm not saying there's anything wrong in doing those things, but like as me personally, the ideologies that I try and live by are that's kind of like where I see myself. So yeah, I wanted to choose a name that also had never been used before. So that's kind of why I chose it. Sorry. Side thing. Also, another thing, I touched on this before. So another good thing to do is if you want to just goes back to live sound again, is volunteering or helping out with DIY sound systems. If that's the thing you want to get into, perhaps you might get a job working at an actual real venue, perhaps front of house monitors, all that kind of stuff. But you just kind of wanted to get into on the sideline, kind of get into DIY sound system vibes. Is honestly most rigs that you probably might like will probably really appreciate your help. It is an absolute pain in the neck to move this stuff about. The money's not great a lot of the time, and there's not the money there to pay everyone. So helping out with other people that have decided to go down this crazy line of crazy sound systems is usually a really, really good idea. And that way you'll learn whether you even want to even attempt to get into it. Because again, sometimes with live sound work, everything's kind of like you will arrive at this time and then sound checks at this time and all that kind of stuff. But with DIY scene, I mean, there's no shift. You start when you start and you end when you end. And it could be, 24 hours sometimes of like time. And if you kind of want to get into it as a thing, it is a bit of a lunatic thing to even want to think to do. So rolling with another crew before you even invest anything into any kind of financial thing is one thing that I would definitely recommend. Here's another good thing, and this definitely applies to anything in live sound as well. This is actually quite a hard one, and that's learning how to listen. I mean, we all have to listen to things by the very nature of what we do, but it's only when you start kind of really, really listening to music to like what actually sounds good. And yes, we could go into a kind of a side tangent about whether L-acoustic sounds better than D&B audio. That's like a whole other thing. But suffice to say, if it sounds, there'll be a point where both of them can sound wrong. And understanding what sounds wrong about it is actually an important thing to know. It is difficult. I'm 10 years deep and I'm still learning what sounds good. I don't have pitch perfect. I couldn't tell you exactly if a frequency is 500 hertz or 250 hertz, but I've got a rough idea. But like learning that kind of thing, like learning to listen, learning even like the nerdy things like low bitrate MP3s versus WAVs, like learning to like why does that sound different to something else, can be applied to if you wanted to build a sound system. If you did, how and why does someone's mid-top box or kick bin or sub sound different to the other person's, and like trying to hone in on kind of like the texture and the tonality and the timbre of what that thing sounds like. And then you can kind of contextualize it and think, I want mine to be like that, or maybe I don't want it like that. But that's the great thing. Like some people have come and heard this sound system, so it's too clean. That's fine. That's kind of what some people like. And that's the beautiful thing is, I think I've said this before to other people, like, if you like beer, there's a good chance that you'll like one type and not the other. Or like some people will like one type of curry and not another. You can kind of apply it to almost anything that's sensory based. Is that audio by its very nature is a sense. And like taste, smell, all those kind of things, it's some things are going to be desirable to you and you like it compared to what other people sound like. An interesting example, a good example to give of that is intentional bad sounds. If you think about heavy metal guitar, that's not like a kind of classic flamenco guitar. That's been put through pedals to kind of distort it, to give it that sound. To an extent, sometimes that's kind of why reggae sound systems sound like the way they do. It's because it's an intentional audio characteristic and like texture that people want to add to give it that kind of sound. So yeah, learning to listen and learning to accept that's why things sound like they do is a kind of a good skill to slowly learn if you want to kind of maybe make a career in live sound. That's a good one. Here's actually a really good one that I've kind of I've started to accept over the last few years. You're going to make a mistake at some point, probably a very, very, very bad one. But learning from that mistake there is kind of how you grow. It sounds very stereotypical thing to say. But I've done all sorts of stupid stuff, like accidentally muting the entire PA for 2,500 people. Like if a performer has just finished playing vinyl and the next person needs just loads of CDJs, maybe you'll have to go and swap some stuff about. I've unplugged the mixer while I've done that. Yeah, and you're just going to have to own that mistake and just like, yep, sorry, that was me. That's actually a good thing, owning your mistakes as well. I feel like in the modern world, people don't, if they make a mistake, people will try and skirt out of, they won't admit it and put their hands up when they've made a mistake, and like accepting that, making an apology, but learning from it. So ever since I unplugged that mixer, like, right, let's follow that cable. Yes, that is the mixer that's plugged in. And then even at festivals and stuff, I've even written on bits of tape or stuff like this. This one's a DJ mixer, so you know what's what. And again, sometimes some mistakes won't even be mistakes. There'll be things that are like effectively accidents that are out of your control. So as an example, if you're working at a live show, let's say you're doing front of house for just a show and for whatever reason, one of the venue's amplifier dies, that's not your fault. The unfortunate situation is that the live sound guy is probably usually going to be like for people's first choice of why isn't it working? It's not your fault. And a level of thick skinness is definitely an important thing to have when in situations like that. But then other mistakes are things that you can just avoid. Like as an example, I know I haven't ratcheted this together at the minute, but normally I definitely would, is due diligence when you're setting your stuff up. Again, this can apply to absolutely to live sound as well as sound system, traditional sound system DIY stuff. Just due diligence when you're running cables, all the basic stuff, like is someone going to walk on top or near it, make sure it's covered, all that kind of stuff. If things are being flown, make sure it's all locked in correctly, all that kind of stuff. Because let's give a good example. Last July, I was at a festival in France, and basically the worst thing that ever could happen to a sound system almost happened to me. I had effectively, imagine 4 times this, roughly, and the crowd pushed my sound system over. They pushed it over. Luckily, no one was hurt. But that there was definitely a lesson in learning. I'm very much kind of a big believer in like, yeah, it'll be fine. Things will be fine. Not always. What happened? So this is a good example of things to avoid. So the ground was very, very muddy. It had rained, but then people had tramped on it, so it was a bit bouncy. Also, this was a bit of a fault of the festival. The ground was on a slight incline. I'm not going to name the festival, it's not polite. The ground was on a bit of a slight incline. And the only thing they gave me to stack, effectively, so 4 times that, so it's pretty big. They only gave me some pallets to stack my rig on. Just pallets, not enough. And also I only had from 7 a.m. till 10 a.m. to set up. And it was actually less time than that because the other system was there. That's beside the point. And because the festival was so rushed, they didn't really and I was so rushed, I just kind of got my rig set up, got it strapped, yada, yada, yada. And it was okay, but it definitely wasn't sturdy. But no one kind of told me off. And that there, see, mistake? That was the mistake. I should have known better. I should have done my own due diligence, which is what I was talking about. I should have said to myself, that's not safe. And it doesn't matter if in that situation I should have had the guts really to say to the promoter, stage manager, doesn't matter who it is, to say, that's not safe. I'm not opening until X, Y, and Z has been fulfilled. What that needed really is some kind of like aluminium decking, steel decking, stage decking, whatever you want to call it, leveled as well, not just even just plonked. Like someone should have come and leveled it, and we should have strapped that rig to the decking. What ended up happening eventually is I actually got the system working again. Thankfully, there was no real damage to it or anyone else. I'm not going to lie, the first thing that went into my head when that happened was, I'm the first sound system that's killed someone. Yeah. And luckily, no, I was worried because earlier that day, people were leaning behind that rig, and I was like super worried that people had fallen onto someone. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And thankfully, because the ground was muddy and soft, when the top, because like I had 3 top boxes kind of stacked like that. So imagine 3 of them all stacked together. This is how mad it was. They were all strapped together. When the tops fell off, they were still strapped. They were just upside down in the mud like that. And thankfully, because they're so well made, the only damage to it was actually the connectors inside where you plug the wires. The connector itself that's in the box is metal, but the socket is metal, but the plug, the actual wire, is plastic. And that's the point of failure. So when it fell over, it snapped. That's the thing that broke. So thankfully, that was the only damage. But yeah, so what I should have done is perhaps put barriers in front of the system. But again, that's kind of an interesting problem, is that like I don't like using barriers because I want people who've paid good money to come and listen to systems, to actually come and be able to get right up in front of it and really kind of like experience it. Because when it's in full force, it is an experience, and I want people to experience that. And a barrier, literally by the definition, is a barrier. I want to remove all barriers of enjoyment. But then the other problem is that the MC. So it was a reggae festival. I'll say that much. The act that was playing was effectively playing like a version of reggae that's kind of like trance. It's not the best. And it had an MC, and they were effectively encouraging the crowd to push the system, to push into the system. So effectively, so you combine all of these things: ground muddy, not level, bad decking, very tall, pushed over. That's why it fell over. So yeah, that there, right there, is a mistake that I've now learnt. And going forward, if I'm in a situation where I'm in that again, I'll just say it needs to be right, because I've got the perfect example of what can happen when it goes wrong. So that's a good example. I'm hoping that none of you will ever have to face that, be faced with the situation of whether you've killed someone with your PA or not. But yeah, thankfully that never happened. Some more advice. Networking. So again, this comes back to, I've talked on this before, really. As you progress in the business, like a kind of like natural level of networking will occur. You'll just start to meet people and sometimes when you'll meet certain people, maybe you'll just kind of like drop it in like, oh, if you ever need someone to do this, just give me a call, that kind of thing. That's like super, super useful. Because you never know, there might be a day, again, for an example, if you're doing live sound here and you're going to do, let's say you're going to do monitors, that's kind of like your thing. There might be an occasion where sometime some band's monitor dude or gal can't do it, and he knows you because you met him at a venue the weekend before, and he's like, are you free? That kind of thing is definitely happened to me in a similar vein. Again, one of the promoters that I'm lucky enough to work with, he does these quite crazy big dubstep shows in London. And it's like randomly on like a Friday, he's like, do you want to do a show with Skrillex next Tuesday? So I'm like, yes, obviously. And so that kind of whole comes back into the whole like networking thing. And then here's another good example. I did a music video shoot with P Money vaguely recently. And the reason that happened is because the music label he worked for, that guy there used to come to Subdub, that event that I first ever heard Sound Systems at. Is like I just met him all these years ago, and he watched me do my thing, and that's why he got in touch. So it's one of those things where meeting people along the way. That's definitely how I've improved my networking. It's yeah, that's one of the best things I can recommend. And then another good one is when you're working, ask people who are potentially more experienced. I don't know if that's the right phrase to use. Ask them if they're doing something that like you're interested by. Just ask, honestly. Like when I'm doing stuff, one of the guys that I work with, Chris. He's starting his own journey of building a sound system, and he asks me questions every show because there's so much to learn. Like I remember. Like when I was building a system, it's like I'd never seen an XLR cable. It's like if you've never seen one before, like if you're not doing a live sound course, like if you've never seen it, like how the hell does it work until you've actually seen it and actually plug it in? It's stuff like that. That's a really good piece of advice I'd give is to start asking questions.